What if you worked your whole life, did everything right, and the system still wasn't built for you? Hi, I'm Harley, and this is Clinically Speaking. Today we're going to talk about Lawn Boy by Jonathan Evison, and this book really hit me differently. Not because it was a hard read in the traditional sense, but because every page felt like documentation of a day at my job as a social worker in the emergency department. The main character is Mike Munoz, and he is Mexican American, and he's genuinely trying. And no matter what he does, he just can't get ahead. And this book asks us to sit there with that discomfort and ask why. The first thing I want to talk about is systemic poverty. And I want to be very precise here because I feel like the media and social media throw this word around and it gets watered down constantly. Systemic poverty is not a personal failure. It's what happens when the system isn't built for you. Think the education system, the housing market, the healthcare system, the job market. These systems are all designed in such a way that it makes it hard for certain groups of people to have upward mobility. The barriers to mobility are baked into the system. Mike is working landscaping, gig work, no benefits, no health insurance, seasonal, no stability, no job safety. And every time he gets close to getting ahead, something pulls him back. His car breaks down. A job falls through. He can't afford a deposit on a better apartment. And from the outside, it can look like bad decisions or just a string of bad luck. We all know that the system was not built for Mike. In fact, the system is doing exactly what it was designed to do. There's a concept called economic precarity. It refers to the chronic instability of someone living without a safety net. And what we've learned is economic precarity isn't just about not having money. When you are in chronic financial instability, your body is constantly in flight or fight mode. Your stress hormones are increased. Your capacity for building long-term planning is decreased. Your risk tolerance shifts. The decisions that may look irrational from the outside make perfect sense in a brain that's in constant threat. This is something that I see in the ED all the time. People aren't making bad decisions. They're making decisions under impossible conditions with no room for error. I'm in the emergency room every day, and one of the hardest things about my job is discharging somebody back to the same conditions that brought them there in the first place. Someone comes in who's unhoused, or they don't have food. We make sure they're medically stable. We provide them a piece of paper with resources on it. And then we discharge them back to a shelter, back to a possible unsafe living condition that we might not know about and they might not be comfortable telling us about, or back to a job that they can't afford to take time off to care for themselves. Mike Munoz shows up in my ED almost every day. People who are exhausted and truly trying, and they're failing not because of anything that they've done, but because the margin of error in their lives is so small that even one tiny mistake is catastrophic. And it's devastating as a social worker because the tools that I can offer them in that moment are not big enough to solve their problem. The second thing that I want to talk about is institutional racism and how that compounds in Mike's story in this book. Institutional racism is when the policies, practices, and norms of an institution produce racially unequal outcomes, even without explicit racist intent. But the intent doesn't need to be there for the harm to be real. And this is where a lot of people get stuck. They want to find somebody with bad intentions, but systems and institutions don't need bad intentions to create unequal outcomes. They just need to be built in a way that advantages some and disadvantages others. Mike is a Mexican American, and you can see how that shapes the opportunities available to him. And it impacts how people see and treat him. He's not taken seriously. He's underestimated. He's passed over. He's talked down to. And Evison is not framing this in the book as Mike being too sensitive or reading into things. He just shows you what it looks like over and over in these small, grinding, accumulating moments. In social work, we talk about the concept of intersectionality to describe how our different identities compound and overlap each other. Race, class, gender, ethnicity. These aren't all separate categories. They interact with each other in very real ways. Mike is not just poor. He is a young brown man who is poor and works in a system that tells him that he is worth less and who's told that their potential is worth questioning. And those two things together create a very specific kind of disadvantage that neither on its own create. So when I'm doing a biopsychosocial in the emergency department, you constantly have to think about where they're coming from. What systems does this person have to navigate? What do their relationships with institutions look like? Because that history truly matters, and it will determine if they'll ever come back to ask for help again. The distrust of institutions is not something irrational. It's historically and statistically earned. There's one more piece that I really want to name because it's truly devastating, and this book does a great job at illustrating it. Internalized oppression is what it looks like when you start to believe everything the institutions and the systems tell you. When every structural signal you receive tells you you are less than, less capable, less deserving, less worthy of opportunity. And unfortunately, at some point, that message gets inside. Not because you're weak, because that is what pervasive messaging does to you. Mike spends so much of this book questioning himself, questioning his own value, wondering if he's the problem, wondering if he's the reason that these things keep happening to him. And watching him slowly unravel the truth about himself is genuinely one of the most moving things I've ever read. And I want to be real about how common this is. In the ER, in therapy rooms, in schools. People come in who have spent years internalizing the messages that they've been told their whole lives. Lawn Boy is not a comfortable read. It's not supposed to be. It holds up a mirror to the way that systems sort people by race and by color before they ever have a chance to really show you who they are. And it does it through one character in this book who is just trying to find his way through these systems and institutions. As a social worker, it's almost like the author followed my patients home and wrote down what their lives really look like. And if you haven't read it, I really think you should, especially if you work in any helping profession. If you have read it, I want to know what moment hit you hardest. Drop it in the comments.